I serve the midnight patrol in a sector where the timber outnumbers the people 10,000 to 1. It is a vast, mostly lonely county defined by thick pine groves, twisting dirt lumber paths, and sprawling estates held by folks who prefer total seclusion. You grow accustomed to the stillness. You learn to relish the long shifts of motoring through ink-black lanes with only the hum of the motor and the dash glows to keep you company. But the total remoteness also means that when something goes awry out here, assistance is a very long way off. My associate and I were idling near a quiet county crossing, sipping lukewarm tea from metal flasks, when the radio hooked to the dash sparked to life. The dispatcher's tone cut through the fuzz. She was a seasoned pro, someone who usually managed major road mishaps and private arguments with a flat, steady poise. Tonight, her tone was entirely altered. Her mood was heightened, tight with genuine strain. Unit 4, I need you to attend to 10 to 54 at the manor at the end of the Upper Ridge Path, the dispatcher said. I have an active link with the owner. He is agitated. I cannot get a clear read on the happenings. My associate grabbed the radio device. Dispatch, can you verify the sort of wanderer? Is the caller providing a visual? Negative, the dispatcher replied, a faint flutter echoing over the signal. The caller is not talking to me anymore. I am just hearing ambient sounds. It resembles heavy hooves, like livestock drumming on a hardwood floor, and a man calling. The broadcast faded out, leaving a thick, heavy hush in the cab of our sedan. My associate and I traded a single stern gaze. He shifted the vehicle into motion, flipped on the caution lamps without hitting the alarms, and engaged the throttle. The drive took nearly 20 minutes. The paved highway eventually gave way to a deeply rutted, unpaved gravel road that wound steeply up into the heavily forested hills. The tree canopy grew incredibly dense, the interlocking branches blocking out the moonlight and creating a suffocating tunnel of darkness around the speeding cruiser. We finally breached the tree line and pulled into a massive, circular driveway. The property was a sprawling, multi-story log cabin built from incredibly thick, dark timber. It belonged to a notoriously wealthy big game hunter, a man who spent his fortune traveling the globe to harvest exotic trophies. The house sat in total darkness. Not a single exterior light was burning. We stepped out of the cruiser, drawing our heavy flashlights and our service weapons. The night air was freezing. We approached the front porch, keeping our boots light on the wooden planks. We did not need to knock. The massive, heavy oak front door had been completely obliterated. The thick wooden panels were fractured and splintered, but the damage had not been inflicted by someone trying to break in. The jagged shards of wood were pushed outward, pointing toward the porch. Someone, or something, had violently smashed their way out of the house. Someone wanted out in a massive hurry, my partner whispered, holding his weapon tightly against his chest as he swept his flashlight over the broken threshold. Or something pushed them out, I replied, keeping my voice incredibly low. We stepped carefully over the splintered wood and entered the cabin. The interior was a cavernous, vaulted space completely dedicated to death. The walls were lined top to bottom with an absurd collection of taxidermy mounts. Massive grizzly bears stood in the corners, permanently frozen in aggressive, roaring postures. Timber wolves stalked across the upper lofts, and dozens of heavily antlered deer heads protruded from the dark timber walls. Our flashlight beam swept across the room, catching the reflection of hundreds of polished glass, eyes staring blindly back at us from the dark. The air inside the house was thick and stale, smelling heavily of formaldehyde and fresh pooling blood. Clear the ground floor, my partner ordered, moving slowly toward the kitchen archway. Keep your angles tight. Whatever did this could still be in here. I moved toward the massive stone fireplace dominating the center of the living room. The heavy leather furniture had been tossed aside, the heavy coffee table overturned and splintered. I found the homeowner resting against the base of the stone hearth. He was dead. The scene was incredibly brutal. His chest and abdomen had been violently gored, punctured by multiple deep, jagged wounds that were entirely too wide and ragged to have been caused by a knife or a spear. The fabric of his flannel shirt was shredded, soaked through with dark blood that pooled heavily onto the rugs beneath him. His eyes were wide open, locked in an expression of terror. "I have a victim," I called out softly. "He's gone." Massive puncture trauma. My partner emerged from the kitchen, stepping carefully around the overturned furniture to reach my side. He aimed his light down at the body, his jaw setting into a hard, rigid line. If this was a bear or a feral animal that got inside, we would see muddy tracks, my partner said, sweeping his flashlight across the pristine hardwood floors surrounding the blood pool. "There's no mud. There are no paw prints leading to the door." I lowered my beam to the floor. tracking the space immediately surrounding the victim. My partner was right. There were no tracks. However, there was a distinct, highly unusual trail leading away from the body toward the dark hallway branching off the living room. It was a trail of dry, yellowed synthetic stuffing, small clumps of brittle animal hair, and thin, rusted pieces of shaping wire. I followed the trail of debris with my light, letting the beam travel slowly up the adjacent timber wall. The wall was decorated with a series of framed Polaroid photographs. They featured the homeowner standing proudly in this exact living room, holding a hunting rifle, posing beneath his various trophies. I looked closely at the photograph positioned directly at eye level. It showed the man smiling widely, standing beneath a truly massive, record-breaking elk head mounted on a heavy wooden plaque above the stone fireplace. I immediately raised my flashlight, aiming the concentrated beam directly at the space above the stone hearth. The heavy wooden plaque was securely bolted to the timber, but the plaque was entirely empty. The iron bolts that normally secured the mount had been violently ripped outward. The massive elk head was missing. "The elk is gone," I said, a cold knot forming rapidly in my stomach. "What are you talking about?" my partner asked, keeping his weapon aimed down the dark hallway. "Look at the picture on the wall," I insisted, pointing my beam at the photograph and then back up to the empty wooden plaque. "Look at the mount. It was ripped off the wall." Before my partner could process the missing trophy, a sound echoed from the deep darkness of the hallway. It was a heavy thud. Clop, clop, clop. It sounded exactly like hard, solid hooves striking the wooden floorboards, moving with a heavy, unnatural, dragging gait. We immediately raised our weapons, aligning our flashlight beams perfectly down the narrow corridor. "Police department?" "Show yourself right now," my partner yelled, his voice booming aggressively through the silent, cavernous house. The clopping sound stopped. A shape stepped slowly out of an adjacent side room, entirely blocking the hallway. My brain completely rejected the visual information entering my optic nerves. It was a patchwork, horrifying abomination of stitched flesh and wire. The massive, decapitated head of the missing elk was roughly, violently sewn onto the thick, hulking torso of a grizzly bear. The creature stood upright on a set of mismatched, decaying animal legs that buckled and twitched under the uneven weight. Thick, crude black sutures crisscrossed the matted fur, bursting open in several places to reveal dry, yellowed stuffing and rusted metal armature wire protruding from the seams. The elk head scraped against the ceiling, the massive antlers gouging deep grooves into the drywall. The creature's neck snapped at an impossible angle, and its dead glass eyes caught the glare of our flashlights. "Drop my partner screamed, completely unable to finish the standard command as his mind failed to comprehend the monstrosity standing before us. The creature lunged forward. It moved with a terrifying, jerky speed, its mismatched hooves tearing into the floorboards as it lowered the massive antlers directly toward our chests. My partner fired his weapon rapidly, the deafening cracks of the caliber handgun echoing violently in the enclosed space. I watched the bullet strike the center of the creature's stitched chest. The impacts produced small, explosive puffs of dry dust and stuffing. The creature did not flinch. It did not even slow down. The bullets simply passed harmlessly through the dry hide and the wireframe. "Move!" I yelled, grabbing my partner by the shoulder and dragging him backward. We scrambled away from the hallway, diving frantically into a heavy set of double doors located just off the main living area. We slammed the thick oak doors shut behind us, the heavy brass latch engaging with a sharp click. "Brace it!" my partner shouted. We threw our combined body weight against a massive solid wood bookshelf sitting against the wall, dragging it aggressively across the carpet until it completely blocked the double doors. A second later, a devastating force slammed into the other side of the wood. The oak doors groaned violently, the hinges straining and protesting under the immense weight of the creature attempting to batter its way inside. The sharp points of the antlers pierced entirely through the upper panels of the wood, splintering the oak and retreating for another strike. We backed away from the barricade, sweeping our lights around the enclosed space. We were trapped in the homeowner's private study. The room was cluttered and chaotic. Empty glass liquor bottles were scattered heavily across the expensive rugs, and dozens of half-burned candles sat in pools of melted wax on the surfaces. Sitting directly in the center of a heavy desk was an open, leather-bound journal. I rushed to the desk, illuminating the pages with my flashlight. "Keep your weapon on the door," I told my partner, leaning over the messy, frantic handwriting scrawled across the paper. The entries were unhinged, heavily detailing a deep, unraveling paranoia. I read the scattered paragraphs rapidly as the heavy, rhythmic battering continued against the barricaded doors. The woods are deeply angry. I took far too much from the tree line. I hunted for sport, and now the forest is hunting me. The spirit is ancient. It lives in the timber. It watches me from the edge of the property line every single night. I can feel the vapor of it pressing against the windows. I flipped the page, my hands trembling as the heavy oak door splintered further under another violent impact. I brought a medium out here. He told me the spirit is vaporous. It cannot be shot or trapped in its natural state. He told me it requires a physical tether, a vessel to anchor the vapor to the physical plane. If I construct a vessel worthy of the forest, the spirit will inhabit it out of pure vanity. I spent 3 days stitching the pieces together in the workshop, a body for the forest. If I can lure the ghost inside the effigy, it will be trapped within the physical materials. Then I can burn the wood and the hide. I can kill the ghost by burning the vessel. I looked up from the journal, the terrifying reality of the situation rapidly assembling itself in my mind. Bullets will never stop that thing. I yelled over the deafening sound of the antlers shredding the upper door panels. It is just dry hide, glass, and wire. The journal says it is a spiritual tether. We have to destroy the vessel. Then what the hell do we do? My partner demanded, his weapon trembling slightly as he aimed at the fracturing wood. I looked down at the floor, sweeping my beam over the scattered debris. The homeowner had been drinking heavily, relying on cheap alcohol to manage his profound terror. Several empty bottles lay on the rug, but near the leg of the desk, I spotted a large glass bottle of bourbon that was still a quarter full of amber liquid. I snatched the bottle off the floor. I grabbed a heavy cloth curtain hanging near the window, drew my tactical folding knife, and violently sliced a long, thick strip of the fabric free. I shoved one end of the cloth deep into the narrow neck of the glass bottle, ensuring it soaked heavily in the high-proof alcohol, leaving the dry end hanging out like a crude wick. "Get your lighter ready," I told him, stepping directly in front of the barricaded doors, gripping the neck of the glass bottle tightly in my right hand. When the door gives way, you light the fabric. Do not hesitate. My partner holstered his firearm, his hands shaking as he pulled a metal Zippo lighter from his vest. He flipped the lid, the small, bright flame illuminating his pale face. The heavy doors could not sustain another impact. The central panel shattered inward, sending sharp shards of splintered wood flying across the study. The creature rammed its massive shoulder against the gap, violently shoving the bookshelf aside with terrifying strength. The abomination stepped into the room, its mismatched hooves cracking against the floorboards. The dead, glass eyes of the elk head reflected the small flame of the lighter. It lowered its massive antlers, preparing to charge directly into our chests. "Light it?" I screamed. My partner thrust the lighter forward, touching the open flame directly to the alcohol-soaked strip of curtain fabric. The cloth ignited instantly, a bright, aggressive line of fire racing down toward the neck of the glass bottle. The creature lunged forward, its jaws snapping violently in the air. I stepped directly into the charge, winding my arm back, and threw the glass bottle directly into the center of the creature's matted chest. The thick glass shattered explosively upon impact. The alcohol coated the dry, brittle fur and the exposed, yellowed stuffing protruding from the bursting sutures. The burning wick met the highly flammable liquid in a violent concussive whoosh. The entire creature ignited like a massive candle. The dry hide, the ancient preservation chemicals, and the synthetic stuffing caught fire instantly, creating a towering, roaring inferno in the center of the study. The creature thrashed violently, its hooves stomping chaotic rhythms against the burning rug. The massive antlers tore blindly into the drywall, ripping heavy chunks of plaster free as the fire rapidly consumed the stitched flesh. An inhuman, echoing shriek filled the enclosed room. The sound was deafening, vibrating deep within my teeth and my skull. The structure gave way under the overwhelming conditions. Its outer layer shrank inward, its frame weakened, and the towering figure finally collapsed onto the floor. Within moments, all that remained was a strange pile of twisted wire, shattered glass, and fine gray residue. At once, the unsettling feeling that had filled the cabin seemed to disappear, leaving behind only the lingering haze in the air. Neither of us stayed long enough to examine what was left. My partner quickly grabbed the safety equipment and dealt with the damaged rug before the situation could spread further through the wooden interior. Then we left. We hurried out of the study, made our way through the dark living room, and pushed through the damaged front entrance into the freezing night outside. Once safely beside our cruiser, we leaned against the cold metal and tried to catch our breath while waiting for emergency crews and investigators to arrive. Later, we carefully prepared our official reports. We described an unusually chaotic scene, an unidentified individual who disappeared into the surrounding woods, and an unexpected incident that had occurred inside the home. Certain details, however, were intentionally left out. The investigators accepted the explanation without much difficulty, and the matter was eventually filed away as another strange and complicated case. In the weeks that followed, the property was thoroughly examined. The owner's extensive collection of hunting memorabilia was packed away and scheduled for auction to help settle outstanding financial obligations. I am sharing this story today for a reason. If you enjoy collecting unusual items, especially pieces acquired from estate sales, take a moment to consider where those objects came from and what history may be attached to them. Sometimes, the things we bring into our homes carry more than memories. You do not know what kind of energetic tether the taxidermist bound to the hide, and you do not know what kind of spiritual vapor might be utilizing the glass eyes to watch you sleep. I know this, because before the state detectives cleared the scene, I utilized my authority as the responding officer to securely impound one small item from the house to serve as a baseline forensic sample of the homeowner's preservation materials. It was a small, perfectly preserved stuffed red fox. I placed the evidence bag firmly on the left side of my desk at the precinct before my shift ended. I went down the hall to get a cup of coffee. When I returned to my desk 3 minutes later, the sealed evidence bag was sitting on the extreme opposite side of my desk, and the fox was facing the other way.